Imagine a vast and powerful empire, built on centuries of military glory and relentless discipline, suddenly in the hands of a man who preferred blood and the arena to the battlefield. Commodus, the emperor who called himself a gladiator, not only challenged the norms of leadership, but also altered the course of Roman wars in ways few can imagine. You might think that Rome's military policies were driven by the strategy and intellect of its emperors. But what if I told you that under Commodus's rule, impulsiveness and the craving for spectacle began to take over? What happens when a man who should be protecting the empire decides to place his own pleasures and fame above all else? In this video, we will explore how Commodus's unpredictable behavior affected Roman wars and the empire's crucial political decisions. Get ready to discover how an emperor who saw himself as a gladiator shaped Rome's military history, not on traditional battlefields, but in the arenas of his own vanity. What comes next will completely change your perspective on the impact one man can have on the fate of an empire. Commodus was born at the heart of power, the son of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, known as one of Rome's 5 good emperors. From a young age, he was groomed to succeed his father and govern the vast Roman Empire. However, unlike his father, Commodus showed no interest in the values of discipline, wisdom, and governance that characterized Marcus Aurelius's reign. The formal education he received, designed to shape him into a responsible ruler, was dismissed by the young prince, who soon showed an interest in activities that reflected his impulsive and aggressive nature. Instead of developing his political and military skills like previous emperors, Commodus became fascinated with the world of gladiators and the Roman arenas. The arena, with its spectacle of blood and violence, attracted the young heir, who saw in gladiators a primal and untamed force that seduced him. While his father sought to maintain the empire's stability amidst complex wars and rebellions on the borders, Commodus preferred to prepare for the staged combats of the arena. His rise to the throne was marked not by grand military campaigns or diplomatic agreements, but by the promise of a different reign, one where power and blood would intertwine. Commodus's relationship with the gladiator persona was not merely symbolic. He not only admired these warriors, but desired to become one himself. When he ascended to the throne in AD 180, following the death of Marcus Aurelius, the young emperor made sure to present himself to the people not as the traditional ruler clad in the robes of senators and generals, but as a gladiator, ready for combat. This caused astonishment among the Roman elite, who viewed with concern the stance of their new leader, and delight among the people, who saw in Commodus a charismatic and brave figure willing to dirty his hands for entertainment. However, this fascination with the arena began to undermine his ability to govern effectively. The time Commodus devoted to training and symbolic combats, in which he always emerged victorious, distanced him from the administrative and military tasks that required his attention. The emperor, who should have been concerned with defending the empire's borders and containing internal rebellions, was, in reality, more focused on consolidating his image as Rome's greatest gladiator. This neglect of state matters would set precedents for impulsive decisions that would compromise Rome's military stability. With his ascent to the throne, what many did not foresee was that Commodus's behavior as a gladiator would directly influence his policies. He saw the empire as a larger arena where he was the master of the games. The need to display power, not through diplomacy or strategy, but through violence and spectacle, would guide many of his decisions in the years to come. His reign, which began with promises of continuity and stability, would soon become a stage for his personal ambitions and wildest impulses. Commodus was not just an emperor. He was the first Roman leader to see himself as a gladiator above all else. For him, imperial power did not come from the position he inherited, but from physical strength and skill in the arenas. This perspective profoundly transformed the way he conducted government and influenced military policies. Instead of prioritizing the advice of his generals or senators, he often ignored them, preferring to make decisions based on his personal sense of dominance. For Commodus, war and politics became an ongoing spectacle, an extension of the fights he performed before an audience. This redefinition of power began to alienate the Roman elite, who expected their emperors to take a strategic and controlled approach based on tradition and military knowledge. Instead, Commodus offered a government driven by whims, where physical demonstrations of power were more important than administrative efficiency. He began to appear in public dressed as a gladiator, an unprecedented move in imperial history, distorting the concept of leadership and confusing the image of an emperor with that of a fighter. Commodus's military policies began to reflect this obsession with the arena. While the empire's borders faced threats from barbarian tribes and internal revolts, the emperor focused more on organizing grand gladiatorial events in Rome, often diverting military and financial resources to promote these spectacles. Troops that should have been used to defend the borders were deployed to maintain order during the games, and imperial funds that should have financed military campaigns were spent ensuring that the gladiatorial games continued to impress the public. Commodus also started to interfere directly in his generals' decisions, basing his orders on impulses that seemed more suited to the arena than the battlefield. He believed that brute violence and displays of strength were what would keep the empire united, ignoring the complex geopolitical realities that required diplomacy and strategy. This behavior undermined the morale of the troops and high-ranking officials, who saw Commodus's decisions as a reflection of his vanity, rather than a leader concerned with Rome's security and prosperity. As the years passed, Commodus's gladiatorial stance on the throne began to erode the empire's military effectiveness. He turned Rome into a grand amphitheater, where his own image as a hero and victor was constantly glorified, while the real threats to the empire grew unchecked. This distortion of reality, where the arena overshadowed the battlefields, created an environment of uncertainty and weakened Rome's position on the global military stage. Commodus's military decisions were often impulsive, shaped by his distorted view of what it meant to be a leader. For him, military campaigns were an extension of the spectacles in the arena, quick, decisive, and bloody. This led him to disregard the advice of his experienced generals, who understood the need for patience and strategy to deal with external threats to the empire. Instead, Commodus sought immediate results, which often placed the Roman legions in unnecessarily risky situations, increasing casualties and weakening the lines of defense. In his obsession with violence and spectacle, the emperor was more interested in defeating Rome's enemies in a dramatic fashion, as if he were in an arena, than in maintaining border stability. This approach completely disregarded diplomacy, which had been a vital tool for previous emperors. Barbarian tribes, which could have been neutralized through agreements, were pushed into war due to Commodus's refusal to negotiate or concede, even when it was strategically advantageous. The influence of the arena also shaped the type of commander Commodus valued. Instead of promoting leaders with refined tactical skills, he favored those who demonstrated brutal strength and blind loyalty to him, creating an environment of flattery and incompetence within the high ranks of the military. These commanders, unable to make independent and effective decisions, led the Roman troops into poorly planned and disastrous confrontations, all in the name of pleasing the emperor and following his impulsive orders. Military campaigns during Commodus's reign, especially on the empire's borders, began to focus more on the emperor's personal image than on the protection and expansion of Roman territory. He frequently demanded that generals return with detailed accounts of battles, not to assess the effectiveness of the tactics employed, but to hear about moments of heroism and bloody combat, which he valued more than strategic results. This shift in focus severely impaired Rome's ability to address emerging threats, such as barbarian invasions in the north and tensions in the east. Over time, Commodus's impulsiveness led Rome into a series of draining conflicts that drained resources and troop morale. The empire, once dominant on the battlefield with military precision and discipline, now found itself entangled in prolonged and senseless wars, driven by Commodus's desire to impress the public with grand victories, or at least with accounts of bloody battles that fueled his image as an invincible gladiator emperor. Commodus's behavior also had a direct impact on the discipline of the Roman legions. Under his leadership, the traditional military rigidity that had been the foundation of Roman power for centuries began to weaken. The emperor frequently introduced arena culture into the army, promoting internal combats among soldiers as a form of entertainment and training, corrupting the disciplined nature that had characterized the Roman military up to that point. This created an environment of instability and uncertainty within the ranks, where loyalty was no longer measured by battlefield competence, but by the willingness to participate in the bloody spectacles Commodus promoted. With the decline in discipline came also a loss of morale. The legions, which once took pride in serving the emperor as defenders of the empire, now saw their skills and sacrifices wasted on internal fights and pointless campaigns. Commodus's erratic leadership, combined with his disregard for military traditions, began to erode the troops' spirit. Trust between commanders and their soldiers diminished, and the cohesion that had made the Roman army so formidable started to disintegrate. Moreover, Commodus's indulgence in personal pleasures and his constant participation in gladiatorial fights distracted from the attention that should have been focused on external threats. He rarely participated in war councils or seriously discussed strategies to defend the empire's borders. Instead, he spent his time organizing grand gladiatorial events, spending fortunes from the imperial treasury to ensure that the spectacles were worthy of his position. This not only drained financial resources, but also diverted the focus of military leadership, which instead of preparing the legions for real combat, found itself forced to participate in these empty displays of power. Commodus's neglect of military responsibilities also created a domino effect on the leadership of the legions. Generals and commanders began to reflect this careless attitude, placing less importance on rigorous training and disciplinary practices. Corruption and nepotism came to dominate the ranks, with command positions being awarded more for favoritism than for merit. This process further eroded the efficiency of the Roman army, which now found itself unable to face well-organized and motivated enemies at the borders. The sum of these factors, the loss of discipline, the demoralization of the troops, and the diversion of resources to the emperor's personal pleasures, critically weakened Rome's military capacity. The empire, once an unbeatable war machine, now found itself at the mercy of incompetent leaders and demotivated troops, all in the name of the vanity of a man who saw the battlefield not as a duty, but as an extension of his own pleasure and spectacle.